Hello everyone, Brad from DevOps Journey here, and welcome to my complete course on learning Django. Now, for those of you that don't know, Django is a web framework that is based entirely on Python. It's also currently one of the most popular web frameworks in 2020, and in my opinion, it's the most intuitive one to learn. I also think knowing a web framework is an invaluable skill, even if you're not using it in your day-to-day life. I've found knowing web frameworks very helpful with anything I do in IT or the DevOps realm. And with Django, knowing a little is knowing a lot. It's very easy to create a nice simple interface for any application you've built. I've actually built several software as a service websites where I've been able to supplement my income on. So it's very rewarding, and I wanted to build this course to help out people that are new to Django. So we're going to build a simple blog website that's going to have all the core concepts that you're going to need to build any kind of application that you want. We're also going to go over how we can get this from the development environment into production, containerize it, and run it on a live Linux server in the cloud so everyone can reach you. So we're not going to leave anything out. By the time you go through all the videos in this course, you will have a full picture of how to get a full stack Django application in production running. And the last thing I want to mention is all the code for all these videos is available in the description below on my GitHub. That way you don't have to be furiously typing as you're following along with these videos, and also you can skip a video or two if you need to and just copy my code. It's there and it's available for everyone to use. But with that being said, this introduction has gone on way too long. Let's go ahead and get into the code and start working with Django. Alright everyone, so the first thing you want to do when getting started with Django is to start in an empty directory, and I have an empty directory here. And the next thing you want to do is make sure you have Python installed. So to do that, just do Python and then -- version, and this is going to give you your Python version if you have Python installed. So I'm on 3.6.3. If you're following along with this course, I recommend any version of 3 or later. And if you don't have Python installed, just head on over to python.org, go to downloads, and download the latest version of Python. So once you've verified that you have Python installed and your version is 3 or later, what you're going to want to do is create what we call a Python virtual environment. And basically a virtual environment is exactly what it sounds like. It's a virtual environment for your Python project. And this is a very good practice for any type of Python project, not just Django projects. So there's many different ways to create Python virtual environments, but the way we're going to do it is we're going to type python -m and go venv. And what this is going to do is create a Python virtual environment directory structure. So once that's created, we're going to activate our Python virtual environment. So just to show what it looks like in Windows, it's creating this file structure, and if you hop in there and go to scripts, what we want to run is these activate files. So I'm going to actually type it in the console. So it was venv/scripts activate, and I'll just hit enter. And depending if you're in command prompt or PowerShell, you might have to hit activate or activate.bat. And if you're on Linux, the file structure is going to be a little bit different. This is all very well documented. And if you don't want to use virtual environments, that's fine. You can still follow along and not use the virtual environment. Everything's still going to work. It's nice to have virtual environments to make your code all packaged together with all its requirements. So once my virtual environment is activated, I can see that it says venv here. So what I'm going to do is start to install Django now. And I'm going to do that using the pip tool. So I'll go pip install Django. Now this is going to go out and get Django, download it to my system, install it into my virtual environment. And if you're not using virtual environments, this is just going to install it into your default Python package folder. So this will take about a minute to finish. So I'll go ahead and speed up the video here. Alright, so it looks like Django installed successfully here. Now, if you want to verify that, we can run Python, and then we want to do -m, and then we're going to say Django, and then we'll do -- version. And this is going to return the version of Django installed. If you're getting an error, then Django probably did not install properly. So we can see we got version 3.0.6. If you're watching this video in the future, it's likely that your version is a higher version than mine. That's fine. Everything's going to be backwards compatible with this tutorial. So we have a virtual environment. We have Django installed in that virtual environment. Let's go ahead and start our Django project. So this is going to be the very first command that you run for any Django project. And to do that, we're going to use the tool called Django-admin. And we're going to say start project. And then we give our project a name. You can name your project whatever you want. I'm going to name mine blog. So I hit enter. If I do an ls, I can see that it created a folder named blog. So let's go ahead and explore that folder. I'm going to pull up my code editor here. So I'll just do code period, and this is going to launch Visual Studio Code for me. Alright, so Visual Studio Code is loaded up here. And if you don't have an IDE installed yet, I highly recommend that you get one. And the one that I always recommend is Visual Studio Code. It's completely free. It has tons of support, tons of extensions. It's good for basically any language out there. And yeah, I just find it so intuitive, so easy to work with, that it's the only IDE I recommend and work with right now. So enough said about IDEs. Let's have a look at what we have created here. So we have the virtual environment, which we already looked at, but what we just created here is this folder named blog. And if I expand this here, you can see that within that folder, it created another folder called blog, but also this manage script. So if you have a look at the code here, there's not much to it, but this manage script is how we're going to be interfacing with Django. The next thing we're going to want to do here is expand this folder, and you can see that there's a bunch of files pre-created here for us. So just like any Python project, you're going to have the init.py file, but the ones that we're interested in is the settings file and the URL. So we're going to be going through these files quite a bit in the future, and we're going to get pretty deep into them. The other two files here, the ASGI and the WSGI, we won't be working on until later in the course. Basically, these are used when you're deploying your Django app to production, and these are basically the web server and application server gateway configurations. Alright, so now that we've had a look at the file structure here, I'm going to go ahead and open up a terminal from within my code directory. And since I'm using Visual Studio Code, it detected my virtual environment and activated it for me. So I have my virtual environment activated. Now I can start working with Django. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to hop into this blog folder. And then from this blog folder, I'm going to run the web server. So I'll do a Python and then manage.py. So it's using this manage script. And then I'm going to send an argument to this manage script. And that argument is going to be run server. And then you can see that it started a development server at our loopback address on port 8000. Now, if I wanted to, I could be more specific and send more arguments. I could send 0:5000, and I want this to be a 0. And then when I send that, we can see how it changes here, and it's saying it's starting server at 0, port 5000. So it's basically saying all IP addresses on this local server are listening on port 5000 for web traffic. So if I open up a browser, I can go to my loopback address and then go 5000, and that'll work. I can get to the default Django server. So I'm going to do this again with just the defaults. If I control click here, it's going to open up a browser for me. And yep, I can get to my web server. And by default, it's going to give you all the Django documentation, Django community, because there's nothing running on this Django app yet. So let's go ahead and start creating our Django app. So I've used the manage script to start the server. Now I want to use that manage.py file to create what we call an app within our Django project. So I'll do that by doing python manage.py, And then I want to send the argument start app. And I'm going to say start app website. And if we look on the left hand side of the screen, we can see that we have this new folder named website. And I'm going to downsize this and I'll expand this folder. Now the second thing that we're going to need to do after running the start app command is we're going to have to set this as an installed app under our settings.py file. So if we go to our main folder here, underneath blog we have our settings. If we open that up, we need to scroll down to installed apps. There's a bunch of stuff here already. What we need to do is add to this list. So I'll just do a new line here, and I'm going to say website, and then make sure that there's a comma there, and that's all we need to do. So what this is doing is it's importing this folder right here as a Django app. So now that we have the website installed as a Django app, let's start off by making a welcome page. So if I go back under this website folder, we want to go under views.py. And once we're under views.py, there's a few things that we need to do. The first thing we need to do is import the HTTP response object. So that's very simple to do. Just go from Django.http import HTTP response. The next thing we need to do is create a function for our view. So just like any Python function, you start off with def, and then you give the function a name. We'll call ours welcome. And then we're going to put colon, and the argument that we always want to send to our view functions is request. Now this request is a built-in object which matches up with an HTTP request. So any attributes that are sent over HTTP will end up in this request object and get sent to this view function. So we'll put that in there like that. The next thing we want to do is have our function return something. So we're going to go return, and the object that we want it to return is a render object. And within that render object, we want to return the request. The second thing we're going to put in this render object is a string, and it's going to be a string to the path of the HTML template that we're going to create. So I'm going to say website/welcome.html. So you can see that this string is very important. This is porting to our HTML file that's going to have all our HTML code for our application. So the next thing that we need to do is create a templates folder that has this website folder that has the welcome.html file. So if we have a look at the left hand side of the screen here, we have the entire folder structure of the application. We have the main folder named blog, and then we have the application folders, one named blog and one named website. Underneath website, we want to create a new folder. And that folder is going to be called templates. And it is best practice within the templates folder to create another folder that has the same name of the parent directory. So we're going to call it website. I know that's a little confusing, but as we go on with this course, you'll see why we want to do that. Basically, it helps out with name collisions. If you have the same HTML files in a different template location, it's just better to do it this way. So now that we have our folder structure here, we have the templates folder and then the website folder within that. Let's create our HTML file. So I'll go new file, and I'm going to call this welcome.html. And we got our HTML file open, so I'm just going to put in hello world. You can put in any HTML code you want, and it will display. So to start, I'm just going to put in a nice string just so we can test everything out. So we have that saved. Let's go back to our views.py, and let's review this function. So we have a function named welcome, and it's returning a render object. That render object is going to render a template at this location. It always knows to look within this templates folder, and then we have the folder name website, and then under that we have welcome.html. So it should be able to find this. So far we've created the view function, and we've created the HTML template. Now we need to set up the logic in our application, so when you put in a certain URL, you get to this function. So let's go ahead and do that. So we're going to want to look on the left hand side of our screen, and look at our project here. So you can see underneath the main folder of blog, I have another folder for the application blog, and that's where I want to go to. So I'll expand this, and then we have the urls.py file that we talked about earlier. So let's go ahead and open this. And here you can see all the URL patterns for our application. And by default, there's only one entry here, and that's for the admin interface. This is something we're going to go over in a later video because it's a really powerful feature of Django. Basically, it lets you have easy access to the database to create a bunch of users, remove a bunch of users, and just work with all the data within your application from an admin GUI. So a really powerful feature, but it's something we'll look at in a different video. So to get started with what we need here, let's start a new line in our URL patterns, and we're going to add a new path. And for this path, we're going to call it welcome. And then we're going to send it the object welcome as well. And if you're using an IDE like me, you'll probably notice that it's underlined. And the reason it's underlying it is because Django cannot find this object. So, just like any Python application, if a function or object is defined in a different file, you need to import it. So to import it, we'll go from website. This specifies the website folder. And then we're going to say views, import, welcome. And we'll need to do this for any function that we define in a view. So we can see that after we did that, the welcome is no longer underlined. So that looks good. This should work. Let's go ahead and open up our terminal again. So I have my terminal open here, and I'm in the blog directory. And within that directory, I have that manage script. So I'm going to do the Python manage. And I need to spell manage correctly here. And then I want to do run server. And this is going to start up our server again. And we can see that our server is running. I'm not getting any errors here, so that's good. We should be able to access our application now. Let's go ahead and control click here. So that opened our web browser, but we're getting an error. And the error we're getting is 404. So this is the HTTP code 404, page not found. And the reason it can't find a page is because it's expecting one of these two URL patterns. It's expecting either admin or welcome in there. So let's go ahead and add welcome to our URL and hit enter. And there you can see it's rendering the HTML that we put in there of hello world. Now what if you wanted to make it so this welcome website displays if you don't specify any pattern at all? Something like that. And I'm going to go ahead and do that. So I'll pull up my code here. And instead of saying welcome for the URL pattern, I'm just going to say quotations. So if there's nothing specified, it's going to pull up the welcome function. And after I put that in, it looks like the terminal has automatically restarted Django. So I'm going to go ahead and go back there. I'm going to hit F5 to refresh. And there we go, it's rendered the hello world HTML template when we haven't specified a URL pattern because we've just used that empty URL pattern. So the last thing I want to talk about before we end this video is the source control I'm going to be using for this project. So I'm going to be using Github to store all the code that we do in these videos. If you look on the left hand side, I've created a new folder named Lab1. And basically what I've done is I've copied the blog folder and put it in there. So all the code that we did in this video is accessible in this Lab1 folder. Now in the next video, we're going to continue to edit this blog folder and create our app. That's going to be our active working directory. But as we end each video, I'm going to create a new folder and paste the code leading up to the end of that video. That way, if you're watching these videos, you can go to the lab folder for that video and grab any of the code that you want, copy and paste it, check your code, make sure it matches up. And it should really help everyone with the troubleshooting. So to get started, I'm going to go into my root directory here. And this has all my project files. And I want to actually create a get ignore file because I don't want to push my venv directory. There's no reason for me to push out the virtual environment. This folder has a lot of files in it, and yeah, it's just not something that should ever be pushed to GitHub. So I'm going to automatically generate this using Visual Studio Code. I'm going to hit Control-Shift-P, and then I'm going to hit git ignore. This is an extension I have for generating gitignore files. You can download this extension, just search for it in the extensions of Visual Studio Code. So I'll click that, and then I'll just include Windows and Visual Studio Code, and hit OK, and you can see that it automatically generates a bunch of stuff. So Windows generates like a lot of files like thumbnails and all this stuff that you would never want to push out. So that's good. I'm just going to scroll to the bottom, and I'm going to say venv / and basically it's saying ignore this venv file. So that looks good. I'm going to close that out. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to initialize this as a git directory. So I'm going to type git init. And you can see it's initialized a hidden directory named .git. This is where all the git information is stored. So if I look on the left-hand side, I notice that my source control has the number 49 to it. So there's 49 pending changes. So I'm going to go ahead and click here, and these are all the changes that it's noticed. So I'm just going to go ahead and under this changes, I'm going to hit the plus sign, and basically it's saying these are the staged changes that we want to commit. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to hit Control-Shift-P, and I'm going to say git commit. And I'll just click here, and it's asking me to put a commit message, so I'm just going to say first commit. And now you can see that there's no changes pending, it's been committed, but we have not pushed this to GitHub. So in order to push this to GitHub, I need to add the GitHub directory as a remote location, and then I need to push it. So I'll go Control-Shift-P, and I'll type git remote, and I want to select git add remote. And it's asking me to give it a name, so I'll say this is going to be the origin, and it wants a remote URL, so I'm going to copy and paste the URL I have. So it's bradmorg/Django tutorial. Hit enter. So the remote location has been added. Now I want to push my code over to the remote location. So I'll go Control-Shift-P one last time, and I'll go git push. And I'll click it, and I'm going to hit OK here. And I can see that it is pushing my changes. Looks like it's complete. If I pull this over and refresh it, I can see my code has been pushed. And if I look in any of these folders, so lab1/blog was the code we worked on today. If I go in here, I can see that, yep, we've created the website folder, and in the view, we've created the welcome function. So I hope that helps if you're new to source control.
Anyways, that's all I have for this video on getting started with Django. In the next video, I'm going to show you how we can create a database model and then get that model into our database, as well as start using the Django admin tool, which is a tool that we use to administrate the data within our Django application. So we're going to be covering a lot of important concepts in the next video, so I hope you can all join. See you soon.